man, I had everything lined up for me. And it still brought me to my knees. And I started thinking, well, what happens to those other guys that don't have all that lined up? The only answers I could come up with.
It's just dumb. It's self-sabotaging.
Today, we have Brett Zachman, someone who didn't just study men's work from the outside,
but lived it, built it, and now leads others through it.
Hey, it's going to be hard, so just choose your heart. For 30 years to have a better diet and save some money every week and to physically exercise. And now I'm 60 and I'm healthy and I'm happy and I have mobility and I have savings. Or you don't do any of that and you're 60 and you're not mobile and your health is crap. Now it's equally hard, if not worse, than the 30 years of self-discipline. So pick which heart you want, now or later.
It's obvious, but I think a lot of us, our ego doesn't want to accept that. We want that quick fix.
You're missing the boat, man. If you don't like who you are, why would another woman on the planet want to be with you? Why would your children listen to a single word that comes out of your mouth? It was really sort of softening into, I might not have all the answers, so maybe I should start learning.
Yeah, it's a big jumping off point for most guys.
My really good friend leans in and whispers, hey man, how was the sex life in your marriage? That's a real non-sarcastic question that actually matters.
You talk about this idea of going from good to great, which I love. Your summit is addressing that question. So what does it mean to be a man in 2025?
Actually, let me break that down.
Hello, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc, and I'm here with Brett Zachman. He's the founder of BeMen. It is an organization in Colorado that helps men become the best version of themselves. They have a summit coming up, which we will be sponsoring as Men's Therapy Online. It's got tons of great speakers. It's in Parker, Colorado. And I'm excited to learn more about it, really spotlight your organization and hear about your story. So, Zach, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Marc, thanks for having me on, man. We're just so excited, like watching your progression, man. I think it takes a special human to serve others and help others. And then as you and I both know, men serving men is even more rarefied air. So really, really love what you're doing and the work. And thanks for being a sponsor of the Men's Summit coming up in 2 weeks and for having me on today.
Great. Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, yeah, we've known each other for a while. We just recently got back in connection after going to this men's work event. So yeah, it's cool to just see how it's all progressed. But let's start with you, right? So what's your personal story? How did you get into doing this men's work? Because you're kind of an anomaly in some ways, is that this isn't your full-time job, you're not a counselor, you're not a therapist, but you built this thing kind of on the side, and that's really impressive. So I'd just love to hear more about that.
Oh, no, I appreciate the question. Yeah, I just try to be different in everything I do. No, guys, actually, let me break that down. This wasn't like, Zach then sort of rose, and evolved and Dalai Lamaed his way up into the stratosphere. And now I help men become better men. Literally to say that in one word, pain. Pain is what drove me. They talk a lot about how out of your pain comes your purpose. And so kind of the Reader's Digest condensed version, 20 years ago, I go through separation and divorce. Now, 20 years ago, maybe that was a little more rare. I use sarcasm a lot, that's sort of man speak. If we're going to talk about something sensitive, we got to introduce some sarcasm. And so I say, it's all the rage now. I'm 54. I've only done it once. I'm a little behind the curve. I should have maybe been working on number 2 or 3 by this point in my life. But all kidding aside, that is a major life event that's happening all too frequently, in my humble opinion. And what was very curious for me in hindsight was a couple of things. First of all, in your work, you would have met with me, and this is what you would have told me 20 years ago, Marc. Well, Zach, you've just done 3 of the top 5 most stressful things on any therapist list, and you did them simultaneously, and you weren't prepared for them. And those 3 things were, 1, I moved out of my home, right? So taking the noble approach, as the man of the house, it was like, okay, I'll leave the 2 kids and the 2 cars and the 2 dogs and the corner house intact with my wife at the time. And we're going to become estranged and separated. And I'll remove myself from this situation because I kind of bought the lie that I'm the problem. And if we could just fix this problem, everything would get better. So I do that. Well, simultaneously, I had been working on my own company for 6 months. So I launched my first company as solopreneurship. So now I've changed my domicile and I've changed my career. And then, of course, we changed our relationship. So my primary friend and companion, yeah, we're not talking to each other, at least not well, and we're not living together. So that was, the joke to me is like that's walking into the perfect storm, and I didn't even go to Walmart and get like an umbrella, some galoshes, and a rain jacket. But I didn't know. I had no foresight. So that would be difficult in and of itself. But then what happened that compounded it is I had 7 of my closest male friends go through the life experience of divorce within the next 2 years. And these were guys I had known, like, one since I was 6 years old in the church, one since the 8th grade, my best buddy in high school, my college roommate. I mean, my inner sphere of guy buddies. And man, it really just compounded it. And then we started doing stuff that you probably help men facilitate now, Mark. We started having real conversations. Instead of a sex conversation being, "Hey, buddy, are you getting some? Ha ha ha." It was over lunch, my really good friend and I, and then he kinda looks around the room almost like we're on candid camera, leans in, and then whispers, which is so like, there's 5 people in this lunch restaurant, and whispers, "Hey, man, how was the sex life in your marriage?" 'Cause that's a honest, vulnerable, real, non-sarcastic question that actually matters. So suddenly we're having these conversations. So I get through kind of the survival, "Oh my god, what the hell just happened?" stage, and then a question popped into my head, like, what happens to men in our adult lives when the shit hits the fan? That was, like, the operative question, because there were 7 guys, right, that went through this, and I looked at myself and thought, "Man, I had everything lined up for me." Like, good parents, good family, good education, college education, lived in great neighborhoods, coaches, teachers, pastors, yada, yada, yada. And it still brought me to my knees. And I started thinking, well, what happens to those other guys that don't have all that lined up? So I started investigating online about my question and about men. And it wasn't pretty. The only answers I could come up with for where do men go when the crap hits the fan was bars and churches. Literally. Now, bars are obviously problematic. Churches can be maybe subtly problematic. And so I thought, well, there should be a place for men to go. So I Googled it, right? That's what we do. We Google that stuff. I really couldn't find much of anything. I mean, I found stuff I didn't want to be a part of. I found, hey, Zach, here's the way to decimate your former spouse in family court law. Take her down, man. I'm like, oh, gross. Yeah, I don't want to be a part of that. So I just sort of started talking because I didn't go see you, Mark. I took the machismo approach. I call it the old yeller. You know, that joke about how the dog wanders off. Now, ladies watching this, men are not dogs, though some of us might behave like such. Um, the old yeller stories, you go under a tree, you curl up, and either you die or magically you survive. And that's what I did emotionally. I just shut down and I didn't tell anyone anything about anything, which is a horrible approach, man. So Mark, what he does is fantastic. And, I started talking, having coffee chats with friends, and it resonated, and sooner or later, we started gathering, and it seemed like, you know what? Maybe we're gonna kinda build a divorced men's support group, except nobody wants to be a part of that club. Right, nobody wants a divorced man card. It's still got a lot of negative stigmatism even though everyone's doing it. So it gestated and evolved over the years into just literally, it's just a men's organization, right? And we came up with BeMen, which is sort of a twist on that man up thought, textually, hey, it's just call to action, guys, be a man. But it's so much deeper than that, as you know. Like, what the heck does that even mean in the calendar year 2025 in the United States of America? So, yeah, that's kind of the beginning story.
Yeah, and there's a lot of threads to pull on, but I just want to say, yeah, I think divorce is a big jumping off point for most guys. I would say, we don't even specialize. I mean, we do work with divorce, but that's not our whole thing. But about 50% of our guys are come from divorce, right? And similar to your story, right? Where it's like, it's not just the loss of the family, which is devastating enough. For many guys, it's a loss of their career. Maybe they start drinking too much. Maybe they start spiraling out. They start to isolate. They lose their friends. They move, right? It's this whole like this tsunami of bullshit that I think really knocks guys on their feet. And it is great that there are organizations like yours and like mine where you can start to get back up again and take inventory. So I'm curious in your story, What are some of the pieces you had to put back together? What are some of the hard truths you maybe had to accept about yourself or about your family? And what are some of the
Yeah.
changes you had to make?
Oh, there were a bunch. I don't know if this statistic still exists. That was 20 years ago, but I somewhere somehow came across a statistic that set out a ratio of like maybe 3 to 1. For every 3 years you're in a relationship, it might take you 1 year to sort of reset, right? Or unwind or recalibrate. And that turned out to be about true. I was in the marriage for about 10 years, and it really, by about year 3, I felt like, okay, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling grounded. But, like, initially, I would tell guys it was sort of like almost like comic books, this alternate universe. I grew up, you know, a lot of times an athlete, so I kinda looked at, life from the paradigm of a game, like, am I winning or losing? And I was obviously losing this game, I just didn't know why. And then, it come out of separation and divorce, and it was like, "Well, what's going on here?" So I end up going to a group called Rebuilding out of Boulder, Colorado, and it's like the 19 emotional stages most any human might go through in a major breakup. Well, it's phenomenal because, this was a whole alternate universe that I hadn't opened up before. And what I would have told you erroneously back then is, "Well, look, my former spouse is a little bit bat crap crazy." Right, it's like she's the problem and I'm a good guy, and I don't know what her problem is, but I started researching her, and then I tell guys all the time, like, it was sort of like putting out an emotional boomerang, but it came back with a cinder block attached, and it knocked me the hell out because suddenly it was like, "Wait, I have people pleaser issues? Wait, I have need for approval stuff going on? I'm kinda waxing a bit codependent? Oh, wow, that was an emotionally abusive relationship. I just thought marriage kinda sucked, and yelling was, par for the course because we don't talk, right? We're not having these big collaborative conversations amongst guys where we compare notes, one marriage to the next. So you're in this isolated mono perspective of, well, this is just the reality of what it is. I guess this is what it is. So it was really first of all, the awareness. It was like this whole just layering of awareness of self, awareness of her, awareness of marriage, human behavior, psychology, all the kind of work that, you're doing such a wonderful job with men and opening that up. Um, and then it was some acceptance. Like I can remember being in about week 3 of that rebuilding thing, and I walked into Boulder and they're like, "Today we're going to talk about loving ourselves." And the jock in me mentally just almost like turned around and walked out the door. 'Cause you know how that goes,
Yeah, I got
right?
any hippie bullshit, like, get
Oh,
that
thank you. You just like, the former quarterback in me was like, "Yep, of course. In the Republic of Boulder, this dude's gonna start prattling on, if I just love myself, I will be singing zippity doo dah on my rear end, and my whole life will become magically the yellow brick road." What a bunch of BS. And guys, I would tell you 20 years later, if you're not buying some of that and drinking some of that Kool-Aid, like, you're missing the boat, man. 'Cause, okay, maybe you're not in love with yourself, maybe that's a little too far, but if you don't at least like who you are, respect who you are, and are talking in your own head to yourself that way, why would another woman on the planet wanna be with you, spend time with you? Why would your children listen to a single word that comes out of your mouth? Why would your buddies ever think, "Yeah," when you're not around, go, "Yeah, that Marc guy, he's incredible, I love him. His integrity, his character, is this, is that." And so it was really sort of softening into, I might not have all the answers, so maybe I should start learning.
Yeah, and how did you like I said, you kinda cracked through that facade. So I guess I want you to talk about that facade that I know many men have, right? That kind of like, "Oh, everything's fine. It's great. No worries here." Like, that's still alive today.
Yeah, totally. And to all the guys, we'll get to this about the men's summit. If you don't have to be cracked, broken, and an amoeba, emotional amoeba on a curbside somewhere, is really thinking of like the guys that like it's good. Because I think so many of us are like that. Well, it's good. Was it great, Zach? No, what's great? Nothing's great. It's good, it's adequate, it's enough. So it's really inviting guys to go move from good to great. Well, what did it for me was I literally had an emotional breakdown. I just didn't know it. So I had kind of, as a Christian man, promised myself, okay, I'm not going to get involved with someone else until we are legally, officially divorced. Well, what I had no foresight for was it was going to take 18 months to do that in our situation. Well, that was a long time. in my world at that time. And so I kind of got involved with the gal and had promised myself I wouldn't. So I'm going against my own integrity and my own rules and my own morality. And then it all kind of culminated where on a Monday we signed some divorce papers. 3 days later, this little short relationship ended. She ended it. And what I didn't know at the time was the emotions that were kind of being placed into the 3-month box for that relationship were tied to the emotions of the last 10 to 12 years with my former spouse that had been locked away in a corner in a box with duct tape and a chain and a lock and et cetera, et cetera. And when we ripped the Band-Aid off of both of those simultaneously within 3 days, I literally had an emotional breakdown. I thought I was having a heart attack in my car driving away from our house, and I found out within the next week from other people like yourself, "Zach, you had a panic attack." Well, I've never suffered, and to all those who are, please seek help, talk to Marc, go see other professionals. I've never really experienced anxiety in my life, thankfully. So I didn't know what that was. I was like, "That was a panic attack? I thought I had a heart attack." They're like, "No, that's a panic attack." I'm like, "People have those?" And folks are like, "Yeah. In fact, some people suffer from that chronically." I'm like, "Oh my God, that would feel like hell on earth to have that more than once in a lifetime, let alone more than once in a week." So that's what did it. That snapped me, and then I went to rebuilding, and then I started reading some books, and I started going to individual counseling. My sons at the time, as we split apart, within about a year, they were at about 3 and 5. So I started taking all 3 of us to family counseling. So we sort of went from, "I don't need any of all of that bologna sauce that's going on in your world, Mark," to, "Oh yeah, I want a buffet. I want a 7-course meal. Anything you've got, I'll read it, I'll go to it, I'll look at it, I'll study it. I want to know."
If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show. I want to ask you about the summit, and you talk about this idea of going from good to great, which I love, right? It being kind of an inspirational thing. But the question I want to start with is one that you posed in the beginning, which is, what does it mean to be a man in 2025? You know, because that has changed a lot, and I know your summit is addressing that question. So I'm curious your thoughts on that. Like, what are the modern demands of a man these days?
It's interesting because it's ever changing. So a couple of the words that I think of are provider, producer, protector, the 3 Ps, you know, um, and when we think of providing, certainly men, women, that's shifted a bit. Right. But gone are the days of the 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s, where we had these very kind of rudimentary roles, separation of church and state. The man does this, the woman does that, the woman never crosses this line, the man never crosses that line. Like a guy who was cooking dinner, what the hell are you thinking? Or a woman who had a career, it was like, you should be barefoot, pregnant in the kitchen, da 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 da. That's all dead and gone, thankfully. Um, but provider, is in my mind, what's your vocation? What's your desire? What do you enjoy? Right? So many times people are like, "Well, I haven't found my passion." I don't know that you have to find your passion. Most of the men I've talked to, I've been around for 54 years now, their passion found them. Not they found their passion. They didn't go do some John the Baptist for 40 years in the desert and found their passion. It's like it bumped into them on a street corner somewhere. So it's more like, what do you enjoy? What are you potentially good at? And then think vocationally, okay, until you get your own planet and your own country and your own currency, at this time, in this space, in this land, you're going to trade time or talent for currency. And I'm an economist by training. I don't know how you exist in 2025 if you can't generate currency. Everything you can't walk in anywhere. You can't even go get a $5 biggie bag at Wendy's and say, "I'd like to exchange love for a $5 biggie bag." They'd be like, "You out of your mind? Are you on meth? What's the matter with you? Just where's your $5?" That's the way that works. So I think that's the provider sense, and tap into that. Think of a vocation, think of a talent, and then focus in on that. Right? Go be the best that you can at that, because the better you get at your talents, your vocation, then typically the more money will come to you. And then, producing is, I think what I had to learn was to become a completer finisher. And what I mean by that is I was, and B-men included, I tended to be a big picture guy. Oh, I just love that, Mark. Like the brainstorming of the big idea, and then let's move on. Well, I think it was Les Brown said that the wealthiest place on the planet is the graveyard for all the books and poems and artwork and business ideas and etc. that are in the grave with some dude who never started it. And so I had to accept the reality of, Zach, you're really good, thinking about a vision, and you are terrible about going from A to Z. Now, if you want me to go from like A to L, I'm your guy. For decades, I was your guy. But the rest of that, I just couldn't be bothered. Well, nobody wants a project that's 10% complete, 20% complete, 45% complete. They want something finished. And then the other thing I realized in becoming a completer finisher is that tapped into my athlete brain, because we're a very results oriented society, right, guys? Fortunately, unfortunately, produce results, get lots of rewards, get lots of recognition. So if you can become a completer finisher in terms of a producer, man, it's going to rain down on you in a positive way. And then protector to me, um, right now we talk about the problem being the 3 threes. And I'm not a big stat guy, but these are really dramatic to me. So the 3 threes look like this. Divorced men, men in general are suffering suicide greater than women by about three times, which is absurd. And what the heck's going on? Well, it's what you were talking about, Mark, the isolation and the emotional disconnect and the ego and all that. And then 1 in 3 kids, they estimate, are growing up with no active involvement with their biological dads. Well, that sounds like a number, but that's actually like a sociological tsunami of problems heading straight through your door, right, Mark? Because that's 12 million, that's like 24 million kids roughly. That's like hypothetically 12 million boys who have no idea what a father looks like, acts like, or behaves like. So they could be doomed to repeat that. And then 1 in 3 women are reporting romantic partner violence in their lifetimes. And 80% or more of the time, it's a man perpetrating against a woman. And it's not stranger danger, guys. It's the whole stereotype of, and then she got raped in Central Park by a stranger behind the bush. That actually is incredibly rare. And so I realized in looking at those 3 threes, I'm like, holy crap. Like all of the trauma, or so much of the trauma in human existence, we're the epicenter. How men go, not to be narcissistic, but how I go as a man has an immense impact, not just on me personally, but all the people around me. So if I could get better, then women become safer, kids become healthier. So that's the protector thing, I think, is realizing you have a responsibility, and it's not just on self. It goes way beyond self.
Yeah, I love that model. I think it really does resonate. And I'm curious, what are some things then, what do men need to leave behind? Some things that are no longer serving us so that we can be the best provider, producer, and protector out there.
The biggest thing I had to leave behind, and fellas, I look, I'm with you. I love you. I haven't even met you. I want to be your brother. And maybe it'll be easier for you. It was not easy for me. Most of the guys I've been around they all have their own story. But those 3 little letters, E, G, and O, and Mark knows this because this is his profession. I'll be damned if dissolving your ego isn't just like an out of body, out of, aliens movie type of experience. I did not go quietly into that good night. I went kicking and screaming and, no, you can't. To me as a former athlete, surrender was weakness. Giving up was you never throw in the white towel. But as you know, in your world, giving up emotionally, right, or psychologically is a totally different premise. So me moving from kind of the rock to being more water and being able to flow. So I had to figure out ways to give up on my ego, that I'm not large and in charge. I'm not the man. I'm just a man. In fact, my story is the story of millions of men. right? Middle-aged guys who've gone through divorce, who were just trying to make a buck, and then they kind of crumbled, and then they had to try and reinvent themselves, and they didn't know where to go.
Yeah, I think dropping the ego is huge and being able to be humble, and that's a spiritual pursuit, being able to be good at being bad at stuff or saying, "Hey, I don't know about this, but teach me." Like, that is difficult for a lot of men. I think so much of we're just posturing, big chest out all the time, but, underneath that, we're just really insecure, and it's okay, right? But it's just like getting better at stuff is fine. Don't be perfect right out the gate, but so much of us live with that pressure.
Oh, yeah. In a results-oriented society, I don't know how you see it with the men you're working with, but I tend to see it everywhere. Like, if you're not large and in charge and you're not the multimillionaire or think of whatever example. If you're a quarterback, you're Tom Brady or you're nobody. It's like, yeah, but folks, that's not the real world. Like we turn people who are the one percenters into demigods or goddesses. And meanwhile, most women will never look like Heidi Klum. Most dudes will never be Tom Brady, right? So if you're wrapped up in that, that's gonna get really, really challenging. That's gonna be a very difficult life to lead.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, preaching to the choir, but, advent of social media and influencers and all that stuff, like, you can see that one of the 1%. And a lot of guys, I think, count themselves out. I think a lot of my generation and younger, we get really intimidated, frankly. We see these, super jacked influencers and are like, well, I'm never going to be that guy. So why even step foot in the gym? And that's just dumb. It's just dumb. It's self-sabotaging, but it destroys our self-esteem and our mental health.
Well, and we're a very instant gratification society. You could take that, and we're gonna talk about that at the summit. It's one of the principles we teach. That old tortoise and the hare thing, it's actually real, guys. So, okay, you're gonna launch your own company like I did at the age of 34. Well, if you're not a multimillionaire by 35, or God forbid, it takes you 6 years to 40, then you should just quit. Well, like, go study the numbers. First of all, like 70% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years. So if you can be 30% that didn't fail, that's success. And then PS, by the way, how many of those become multimillionaires is just like it's a astronomically small number. And so we're literally like it's always the quantum leap. It's never the like and even if you go study success, like I remember learning about Starbucks way back, right, 20 years ago, and I thought they started, like, 10 years ago, my mentor who was teaching me started laughing out loud. I'm like, "What's so funny?" He's like, "Well, you think Starbucks started 10 years ago, right?" And this is, like, whatever, 2010. I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "They've been around for almost 20 years, 22 years." I'm like, "Wait, what?" And it took them, like, 4 years to launch their first shop.
The timeline is crazy, and yeah, it's like you said, we need to be talking to each other about real life, not just posturing, so that we actually know what these timeframes are like and try to, establish our life and expectations that way. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about your organization, talk about the summit. Can you share a little bit about, we'll start with BeMen. Like, what does BeMen do? What are their structure? I know you guys have events. Like, share a little bit about what it does.
You alluded to it at the beginning on the onset, and so I wanna go back to that because I think it does matter, in my humble opinion. And look, there's 2 forks in the road. There's the for-profit fork to go down that road, and then there's the non-for-profit. And a long time ago when I was launching this, I realized, I'm not comfortable with a word I call disingenuous. And so disingenuous is, I'm gonna prey on the weakness in men, that they don't have all their poop in a group, so that I can make bank on their weakness, so that I can put my kids through college and have a sweet sports car. I can't sleep well at night with that. Now, honestly, my ego got the better of me because when I was launching B-Men, I thought this is gonna be amazing. Like, this is the secret sauce. Once all the guys hear about this, oh my god, it's gonna be like Fight Club. We're gonna have hundreds, we're gonna have thousands, we're gonna have we're gonna have 1,000,000 men across America in this, Mark. And if you do the math, like 1 or 2 degrees of separation, 1,000,000 men, that's gonna be billions in capital. We have to make it a nonprofit, or the greed is just gonna you know, take us out like a tsunami. Well, guys, 15 years later, we have almost 1,000 people in our community. So all of that didn't happen. but it is a nonprofit. So it's a 501c3 organization in the state of Colorado. The men that run it out of their hearts, not out of their pocketbooks. So I have a corporate job. Our advisory council of 5 men all have businesses or they're solopreneurs. So they're doing this on the side. No one gets paid any dollars at this time for that. We're planning this summit, right? So no, we don't have paid speakers, right? If anything, Marc and about 8 or 9 other small business sponsors, we get revenue 2 ways. We get revenue from the ticket sales and we get revenue from the sponsors. And that will literally pay the way to just host the event, right? And bring this to all these men. And so with BeMen, how we've structured this is there's kind of 3 layers. There's the public facing website. There's an open group community on Facebook that's grown to over 800 people now. Now here's an interesting fact. There's over 600 men and there's almost 200 women. And I realized in a speech to the state of Colorado about 10 years ago, when a gal who ran a battered women's shelter came up to me and said, that was a great speech. Please don't make your organization a secret. And I said, what are you talking about? And then we talked a little bit more and I realized she was talking like Masons, like secret society for men. And I said, well, why are you telling me this? She said, well, look, I'm the executive director of battered women's shelter. All my staff are female. All my volunteers are female. If we hear that BeMen is having a closed door, right, this summit, we are not going to assume that you're out to save the planet. I thought, oh, crap. Well, that sucks. That's half the population. All the women just checked out. So we invite women who are eager to support men to be a part of the community. Now they can't come to the events, right? So they can window shop, they can't sample the merchandise. So then we create events. So we have a monthly event we call Beers, Bros, and Bucks. So think happy hour with a purpose. So this is where men can come to a safe place, have a beer, don't have a beer, have a beverage, have a burger, and chat. And we come up with themes monthly. Could be suicide prevention month, could be ego, could be bucks, right? You name it, economics. Then we will come up with give back events where we will take the kids from, say, Mount St. Vincent home out for bowling, pizza, and soda. Or we'll go support St. Baldrick's Foundation and Kids Cancer Research. Or then this annual event, right, this summit, where this is kind of BeMen's give back to all the men who might want to come to, for us to pour into you guys.
Yeah. And what happens at the summit?
Yeah, great question. So the summit is going to be an all-day event, 8 to 4, 4:30. And the way we've structured it, we're not trying to bore you to tears or flatten out your butts, guys. So we're going to start with a continental breakfast. Networking is such an overused word, Marc. I'm sure you hear this as a solopreneur. So we call it connection. That's what breakfast is about. Whether you don't eat, come for that hour just to meet a guy that you haven't met before, and who knows where that conversation might lead you. Then we're going to break into the theater. We'll be in a theater, and we're going to have a morning and afternoon sessions. And we've got 8 speakers lined up throughout the day, 4 in each half of the day, giving about a TEDx style talk. Each will have about 20 minutes, and they're going to attack the idea of kind of male wellness or your life from different perspectives. We'll take a mid-morning, mid-afternoon break because we've got our small business sponsors like you in the lobby, and we want men to interact. And we'll take about 90 minutes for lunch as well. And then we've got a panel discussion set up in the afternoon where all the speakers are going to do a little bit of an open Q&A where guys in the audience can just throw out, whatever burning question you might have, and then get multiple perspectives from some guys who've been at this for 10, 20, 30 years.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats, all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online. One of the things I like about your organization is the holistic approach. like, it's not just mental health. You're talking about finances, you're talking about nutrition, you're talking about fitness. Like, you're really saying, like, how do you be a better man across all categories? So I'm curious what categories are gonna be represented at the summit, or what kinda speakers that you bring in to help guys level up, across the board.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So, um, I think it kinda started, and this is how things happen like this, I think, where we started talking about the different categories of life, and we were talking, "Okay, well, I guess you've got your emotional and your financial and your mental and your physical and your spiritual." And it was just a concept. And now it's kind of become the pillars of what we teach. And so we call it the 5 pillars of male wellness. And inside of that, you've got your emotional intelligence, you've got your financial freedom, you've got your mental toughness, your physical fitness, and your spiritual power. And we really believe in this. And for me, I don't know how other men are, but we're in the information age, which just seems overwhelming to me. It's just such a complicated world. So 5 things feels good to me because it's simple, right? It's straightforward. And then we try to create a daily discipline in each one of those categories. Now, fellas, this isn't go become a millionaire in the financial category. This is stuff that any dude on the planet could do, whether you're 20, 40, 60, 80. But here's the catch. Could you do that every day for a year, a week, a month, a year, 10 years? And I'm telling you, on the surface, like, yeah, of course I could do that. I The consistency is the key, and I'll be damned, fellas. I've set goals before. Okay, I'm gonna walk 1 mile or I'm gonna run 1 mile every morning for the next 54 mornings because that's my age. Just try that. I promise you, you won't shoot 1,000. You won't be 54 out of 54. Life will get in the way. So it's these simple concepts to move you forward in each one of those categories. And then the guys that are going to speak are really going to touch on that. We've got Jeff Ruiz talking about emotional intelligence. We've got Jason B. Kendrick talking about shadow work. We've got David Pissarra, who's launched something called Dad's Law School, talking about the legalities of the world, right? You've got somebody like a Chris Natsky. Chris is over 60 years old. He's an 8th degree grandmaster black belt. He's led 1,000 students in 4 decades to black belt status. Like this guy is a walking, talking Mr. Miyagi. Like the first time I met Chris, I was intimidated because I was like, dude, this guy could probably kill me with his pinky. And then you get to know Chris, and that's not what it's about. That's never what it was about. It wasn't being a killer. It was teaching life skills inside a dojo.
Yeah. That sounds like an awesome lineup. I'm curious about the daily doses, right, or the daily disciplines. Can you share a couple more? Because if guys are being inspired by this podcast and they want to just do something, right? What are some things that they can do to just start themselves on the path in these different categories?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Let me think of a few here. So I'm gonna steal a little bit of my own thunder. Let's talk about something that for me personally is not a problem, but for so many Americans, I mean millions it is. And that's, your physical image and quite frankly, your weight, right? And the diet thing has just gone on and on, right, for decades now. And is it Atkins or is it carnivore or is it, I don't even know all the names, right? There's dozens of them out there now. Um, so so there's a concept we teach from a book called The Slight Edge. So it's the daily, almost moment by moment decisions that you're making, fellas, that you think don't matter, compounded over time. So the example I'm going to give in the summit is breakfast. Okay, most important meal of the day, jokingly. All our moms told us that, blah, 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 right? Eat your breakfast. Okay, so you got a banana and a donut. And the thing about it is it's not dramatic. That's the catch. So I ate 10 donuts in 10 days. Does somebody have to call 911? Of course not. Don't be silly. Okay, I eat 365 donuts in 365 days. Do I go to the hospital? Probably not, but I might have gained some weight. Okay, now let's fast forward 10 years. Oh, hold on a second. If I've eaten 10,000 donuts and 0 bananas, I might have a problem. In fact, the results are in, and now I'm type 2 diabetic. I'm 50 to 75 pounds overweight. I might have shaved 2 or 3 years off my lifespan. And by the way, the work it's going to require now to undo that, remember that 3-to-1 thing that we were talking about coming out of divorce? You might be facing something like that. So if you've had a bad habit for 10 years, do you have another 20 years or 30 years to unravel that bad habit? And the answer is, of course you don't. So that's an example of figuring out, like Atomic Habits is a great book out there, and habits are positive or negative. And then just figure out for you which ones are the ones that you need to hone in on.
Yeah, that's a great example, and I think it makes it, like, doable, but and I'm curious your thoughts on this as, as an athlete and as a business owner too, right? Of, like, it takes discipline. And like you've been saying or alluding to, right, with like the information overload, with instant gratification, with like a lot of people like yourself struggling to finish things, like discipline is hard. Discipline's really hard. And there's so many like legit objective forces out there, and companies are trying to destroy your discipline every single goddamn day.
Totally. Totally. I mean, so we met a guy, Johnny, at the Big Ten event, and Johnny's like the age of my sons, and he's a strapping dude. Stood up next to him. This guy's probably 6'4", 215 pounds. And he's like, I don't know, 23 years old. So he's 30 years younger than me. And he said, well, Zach, you look like you can really handle yourself. And he meant physically. I was like, well, I appreciate that, Johnny, coming from a guy your size. He's like, no, but seriously, what does that take? Like, how'd you do it? What's the secret sauce? And I said, Johnny, I have an answer. I don't think you're going to like it. He's like, okay, now I'm listening. I'm like, there is no secret sauce. It's consistency. It's self-discipline. I said, I'm 54. I don't compete at anything. I'm not even in any organized sport anymore, but I still attempt to train as if I were an athlete in my head. So I'm convincing myself that I'm in training. Now, some of that feels lame to me. I'll be honest, my ego gets in the way. I don't run in the mornings anymore because I have bad cartilage in both my knees. I found out from all the stuff I've done for 30 years. But I do try and walk, and I try and walk every day. Now, it's not some leisurely stroll, like I'm 80 years old. I'm 54, so I'm trying to walk like a mile and a half at about a 13-minute mile clip, which is pretty quick. But then it's setting goals and challenges for myself of, can I do that 3 days a week? Could I do that 4 days a week? Could I do that 6 days a week? Could I do that 7 days a week? And so that is one of the big ahas, what you touched on, Mark. Self-control, self-discipline, self-sacrifice. Because look, who in their right mind wouldn't want to eat a donut every morning for breakfast for the rest of their life? Who wouldn't want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger but never go to the gym? Like we don't, and honestly, it's our brains. Our brains don't want to work hard. But what I have found to be successful in anything, any one of those 5 pillars, just life in general, it's going to take work and self-discipline. There's just no really way around it.
I say it to my guys a lot. It's like, it's gonna be hard. And it's obvious, but I think a lot of us, our ego doesn't want to accept that. We want that quick fix. We are pleasure-seeking creatures. Sometimes we get excited in the beginning, we're making a change, but you look at like month 2, 3, 4, year 2, 3, 4, you get bored. But like that is what it takes. It just is going to suck, but it's going to give you a better quality of life, and health down the line.
And I can't remember which influencer or celebrity person said it. And it's probably been said by multiple, but it really caught me where they said, hey, it's going to be hard, so just choose your hard. Because here's one set of hard. What was hard to self-discipline for 30 years to have a better diet and to save some money every week and to physically exercise. And now I'm 60 and I'm not 30. And I'm healthy and I'm happy and I have mobility and I have savings and I can go places and do things and I can provide my kids, my wife, and my buddies. Or you don't do any of that and you're 60 and you're not mobile and your health is crap and you're way overweight and your diet's terrible and you have no savings and you're living off credit, right? And so now it's equally hard, if not worse, than the 30 years of self-discipline. So, it's that pick which hard you want, now or later.
I think that's great. And I know that BeMen and that community, it's guys kind of on the same path. So I think having that accountability structure, having guys that you can kind of riff with, get advice from, have each other accountable, that's really critical, so that you can make these changes in your life because without without a sense of community and camaraderie, it's really lonely. So I really do like what you are providing out there. As we're moving towards the end of this episode, I'm curious, where can people learn more about you and about your organization?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Appreciate that question. We're on the World Wide Web. So if you go to www.bemen.org, you'll find our public facing website there. Our handles are like B Men Brothers, plural. So if you go to Instagram, you can find us there. If you go to Facebook, you can find our nonprofit page there. Um, and then my email address is Zach, ZACH, at BeMen.org. So, feel free to reach out. You can also reach out right on the homepage of our website, right? You can submit something to us. And then for those of you that are curious, about either taking the next step or the first step or any step in between, go to bemen.org/summit. And that's our landing page where you can see the highlight video from last year's event. You can register and buy a ticket. You can read about all the speakers and even click into, their websites and whatnot. Um, and guys, honestly, like we're running this as a nonprofit for $47. $47, not 470, not 4,700, right? For $47, we're going to feed you breakfast and give you a phenomenal day of connecting. So we would love, love, love for you to be there with us.
Great, great. Well, Zach, thanks for being on the show. And listeners, check out his organization. All that stuff will be in the show notes. So click the description and you'll see all the links to everything that they have to offer and get involved. I mean, it's like extremely affordable. It's a great community and something that is needed out there. So, Zach, I'm really honored to have you and spotlight your organization on our podcast.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me today, brother. Appreciate you.
Yeah. And listeners, thank you again for tuning in. Men's Therapy Podcast is part of Men's Therapy Online. So all of our stuff is at menstherapy.online. We offer individual, couples, and group therapy. We're all male counselors working with all male clients. So we do it a little bit differently over there. So check us out, menstherapy.online. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week on another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. Don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.